There is something deeply sacred about the quiet places of the heart, places we often overlook because the world has trained us to expect noise, intensity, and spectacle. We live in a time where everything competes for attention, where voices are loud, constant, and demanding. And without realizing it, we begin to assume that if God is going to speak, it must come with that same intensity, something undeniable, something impossible to ignore. But that is not how the Holy Spirit most often moves. The Holy Spirit does not force his way into your thoughts. He does not shout over the chaos. He gently waits for you to become still enough to notice him. And many miss him, not because he is absent, but because their minds have never learned how to become quiet. You see, there is a difference between silence on the outside and stillness on the inside. You can be in a quiet room and still be full of noise within, worries, plans, fears, questions, distractions, all speaking at once. And in that inner noise, the voice of the Holy Spirit can be easily overlooked, not because it is weak, but because it is gentle. There is a tenderness to how he speaks, a softness, a presence that does not demand your attention but invites it. And so often, it comes in moments you might dismiss, a pause between thoughts, a gentle impression that seems almost too simple, a quiet knowing that rises within you without explanation. And if you are not careful, you will brush it aside, thinking it is just your own mind wandering. But it is in those very moments that something divine is taking place. The Holy Spirit speaks in a way that requires your willingness to slow down. He honors your attention, your awareness, your hunger to hear him. And when you begin to quiet the noise, when you intentionally step away from the rush, the pressure, the constant stimulation, you create space for him to be recognized. Not because he has suddenly arrived, but because you have finally become aware of him. There is a sacred discipline in learning to be still, not just physically but internally. To quiet your thoughts, to release your need to figure everything out, to let go of the urgency that tells you every answer must come immediately. In that stillness, something shifts. Your spirit becomes attentive. Your heart becomes open. And what was once unnoticed becomes unmistakable. You begin to realize that his voice has been there all along. It was there in that gentle thought that brought peace when you were overwhelmed. It was there in that quiet urging to pause, to reconsider, to choose differently. It was there in that calm assurance that didn't match your circumstances, yet felt more real than your fears. But it did not come with noise. It did not come with pressure. It came with stillness. And this is where many struggle. Because stillness requires trust. It requires you to step away from control, from striving, from the need to manufacture clarity on your own. It asks you to believe that God is able to speak without force, that his presence does not need to compete to be real. The world will tell you that what is loud is important, that what is urgent must be acted on. But the Holy Spirit does not operate in confusion or chaos. His voice carries a different nature. It is steady, it is calm, it is deeply anchored in peace. And when you begin to recognize this, everything changes. You stop chasing dramatic signs and you start paying attention to the quiet. You stop overlooking the small impressions and you begin to honor them. You become aware that the most profound guidance often comes in the simplest form, a thought, a nudge, a whisper within your own mind that feels set apart from the rest. And as you learn to listen in this way, you begin to experience something beautiful. The noise loses its power over you. The distractions become easier to set aside. And the quiet places of your heart become filled, not with emptiness, but with presence. A presence that has always been there waiting to be heard. The Holy Spirit is not distant. He is not silent. He is speaking even now. But his voice is found not in the noise of striving, but in the stillness of a surrendered heart. And when you learn to become still enough to hear him, you will realize you were never alone in your thoughts. And as you begin to grow familiar with that stillness, something remarkable starts to happen within you. What once felt like ordinary thinking begins to take on a different depth, a different weight. You start to notice that not every thought passing through your mind is the same. Some are restless, scattered, driven by worry or habit. But then there are others, quiet, steady, almost set apart, that carry a sense of meaning you cannot ignore. These are the moments where many hesitate because it feels so simple. It feels almost too natural to be something divine. We have been conditioned to believe that if God speaks, it must feel external, unmistakably separate from ourselves. And yet, the Holy Spirit often chooses the most intimate place of all, your inner thoughts, to make his voice known. He speaks in a way that does not interrupt your humanity but gently works within it. There are thoughts that come with a certain clarity, even when everything around you feels uncertain. A direction that seems to rise up quietly without force, a sense to pause, to move, to speak, or to remain silent. And while it may sound like your own thinking, there is something about it that carries a different quality, something pure, something steady, something that draws you toward what is right. The Holy Spirit does not confuse your mind. He brings a simplicity that cuts through confusion. Even when the path is not fully revealed, there is a quiet sense that you are being guided, that you are not wandering aimlessly through your decisions. And yet, how often do we dismiss these moments? We question them. We overanalyze them. We assume they are just passing thoughts, nothing more than imagination or habit. And in doing so, we begin to overlook one of the most personal ways God communicates with us. Because the Holy Spirit does not always speak in dramatic interruptions. He often speaks in gentle impressions that blend so closely with your thoughts that they require your discernment, your attention, your willingness to pause and consider, what is this I am sensing? There is a peace that accompanies his voice. Not always an emotional feeling, but a steadiness, a sense that what you are receiving is not driven by fear, not pushed by pressure, not tangled in confusion. It feels clean, it feels right, even if it challenges you. Sometimes it is a quiet correction, a thought that gently redirects you when your heart begins to move in the wrong direction. Not harsh, not condemning, but clear. It brings awareness, not shame. It invites you back, rather than pushing you away. Sometimes it is encouragement. A simple thought that strengthens you when you feel weak, reminding you to continue, to trust, to hold on. It may come in the middle of doubt, yet it stands firm, unshaken by the uncertainty around it. And sometimes it is guidance. A subtle nudge that leads you to make a decision you hadn't fully considered, or to take a step you might have hesitated to take. It does not overwhelm you with details, but it gently moves you forward, one step at a time. This is how the Holy Spirit works within the quiet flow of your thoughts, shaping, guiding, whispering in a way that honors your freedom while drawing you toward truth. But to recognize this, you must become attentive. You must learn not to treat every thought as equal. There is a difference between the noise of your own mind and the clarity of his voice. And that difference becomes more evident as you begin to slow down and observe what is happening within you. You begin to ask yourself, does this thought carry peace or does it carry pressure? Does it draw me toward truth or does it pull me into fear? Does it feel scattered or does it feel settled? And as you continue in this awareness, something begins to sharpen within you. You start to recognize patterns. You begin to notice how certain thoughts lead to rest, while others lead to confusion. You become sensitive to the subtle ways the Holy Spirit communicates, and what once seemed uncertain begins to feel familiar. It is not that his voice has changed. It is that your awareness has grown, and the more you honor these quiet impressions, the more clearly they begin to stand out. What was once easy to dismiss becomes something you recognize almost immediately. Not because it is louder, but because it is consistent in its nature, steady, peaceful, and aligned with what is good. The Holy Spirit is closer than you think, speaking more often than you realize, using the very place you are most familiar with, your own thoughts, to reveal his presence. And when you begin to understand this, you will no longer overlook the quiet moments, because you will know they may be the very place where he is speaking to you. But as you begin to notice these quiet impressions, these gentle thoughts that seem to carry something deeper, a question naturally rises within you. How do I know this is truly the Holy Spirit? How do I know I am not simply listening to my own mind, my own desires, my own emotions? And this is where discernment becomes essential. Because not every thought that enters your mind is from God. Your mind is a place of many voices, memories, fears, habits, influences from the world around you. They all move through you, sometimes quickly, sometimes persistently. And if you are not attentive, it can become difficult to separate what is divine from what is simply human. The Holy Spirit does not ask you to accept everything you think as truth. He invites you to recognize what carries his nature. There is a distinct quality to his voice, something that sets it apart from all others. It is not chaotic. It is not confusing. It does not pull you in opposite directions. Even when it challenges you, it does so with a clarity that brings understanding, not disorder. You may feel conviction, yes, but never condemnation. There is a difference between the two, and it is vital that you understand it. Condemnation presses down on you. It fills you with shame, with heaviness, with a sense that you are unworthy and beyond hope. It drives you away, makes you want to hide, to withdraw. But the Holy Spirit does not speak in that way. When he corrects, there is a light within it, a clarity that reveals what is wrong, but also draws you toward what is right. It does not crush you, it restores you. It does not accuse, it invites you back into alignment. And so when a thought rises within you, you must learn to pause and ask, what is the nature of this voice? Does it bring peace even in correction? Does it lead you toward truth, toward love, toward integrity? Or does it stir fear, confusion, and pressure? Because the Holy Spirit will never lead you into fear-driven decisions. He will never rush you into something through anxiety or panic. His voice may be urgent at times, but it is never frantic. It is steady, it is anchored. It carries a sense of assurance, even when the path ahead is not fully clear. And this is where many are led astray, not because they do not hear, but because they do not test what they hear. There must be a willingness to weigh your thoughts, to examine them in the light of truth, not with doubt that paralyzes you, but with wisdom that protects you. The Holy Spirit's voice will always align with what is pure, what is good, what is right. It will never contradict truth. It will never lead you into deception, pride, or harm. Even when it calls you into something difficult, something sacrificial, there will be a purity within it that cannot be denied. And often there is a quiet witness within you, a sense deep in your spirit that says this is right. Not because you have all the answers, but because something within you recognizes the source. This recognition does not always come instantly. It is something that grows as you walk, as you listen, as you learn through experience. There will be moments when you question, moments when you hesitate. That is part of the process. But over time, as you continue to seek, something begins to sharpen within you. You start to notice the difference more clearly. You recognize how the Holy Spirit speaks with consistency. His voice does not shift with your emotions. It does not change based on circumstances. It remains steady, rooted in truth, even when everything around you feels uncertain. And in contrast, you begin to see how other thoughts behave, how fear tries to rush you, how doubt tries to confuse you, how your own desires may try to persuade you in subtle ways. And instead of being carried by them, you begin to stand back and observe. You become aware, and in that awareness, discernment grows stronger. You no longer feel the need to react to every thought. You learn to wait, to listen more deeply, to allow what is true to rise above what is not. And in that process, the voice of the Holy Spirit becomes clearer. Not because it has become louder, but because you have learned how to recognize it. There is a peace in this, a quiet confidence that begins to settle within you. Not a confidence in your own ability, but a trust in the one who is guiding you. You realize that you are not left alone to figure everything out. That there is a presence within you, faithful and steady, helping you discern, helping you understand, helping you walk in truth. And as this awareness deepens, the confusion that once surrounded your thoughts begins to fade, because you have learned to recognize the voice that has been with you all along. And as discernment begins to grow within you, there is something else that becomes unmistakably clear, a quiet, steady companion that walks hand in hand with the voice of the Holy Spirit. It is not loud, it is not forceful, and yet it is deeply powerful. It is peace. Not the kind of peace that depends on everything going right around you. Not the kind that comes from having all the answers or seeing the entire path ahead. This is different. This is a peace that settles within you even when questions remain, even when circumstances are uncertain, even when the decision before you feels weighty. It does not remove the challenge, but it steadies you in the middle of it. And this is one of the most beautiful ways the Holy Spirit confirms His voice within your quiet thoughts. When He speaks, there is a settling that takes place, a sense that even if you do not fully understand, you are not lost. You are not alone. You are being guided. You may be standing at a crossroads, unsure of which direction to take, and suddenly there is a thought, simple, clear, and with it comes a calmness that cannot be explained by logic. It does not argue with your fears. It does not try to overwhelm your doubts. It simply rests within you, steady and unmoving. That is not something you manufacture. That is something you recognize. Because your own mind, when left to itself, often moves in cycles, overthinking, questioning, revisiting the same concerns again and again. It searches for certainty, it tries to control outcomes, it leans toward what feels safest. But the peace that comes from the Holy Spirit is not driven by control. It is rooted in trust. It allows you to move forward without having every detail secured. And this is where many struggle, because we have been taught to rely on clarity before we act. We want assurance in the form of visible proof, logical conclusions, guaranteed outcomes. But the Holy Spirit does not always provide that kind of certainty. Instead, He offers something deeper. A quiet assurance that anchors you, even when the future is still unfolding. This peace becomes like a signal within you. When a thought aligns with His voice, there is a stillness that follows it. Not a temporary emotional relief, but a deeper settling that remains even when you revisit the decision. You can step away from it, come back to it, and that same calm is still there, waiting unchanged. But when a thought is driven by fear, pressure, or confusion, it does not carry that same steadiness. It may feel urgent, it may feel convincing in the moment, but it does not rest, it pushes, it demands. It creates a sense of unease that lingers beneath the surface, no matter how much you try to justify it. And if you are attentive, you will begin to notice this difference. You will see how the Holy Spirit does not rush you into decisions through anxiety. He does not create panic to force your hand. Even when something requires action, his voice remains composed, grounded, and clear. There is a quiet confidence in it, a sense that you can move forward without being driven by fear. This does not mean the path will always be easy. Sometimes the direction he leads you will stretch you, will challenge you, will call you beyond what feels comfortable. But even in that stretching, there is peace. A peace that says, you can trust this step, and that peace becomes a guide. Not the only guide, but a powerful one. It works alongside discernment, alongside truth, alongside your growing awareness of his voice. It helps you recognize when you are aligned and when something is not quite right. But here is something you must understand. Peace is not the absence of all emotion. You may still feel uncertainty, you may still have questions, you may still face moments of hesitation. But beneath all of that, there is something steady, something unshaken. It is like a foundation beneath the surface, holding you in place even when everything above it seems to move. And the more you learn to pay attention to this, the more clearly it begins to speak to you. Not in words, but in presence. In the way it remains when everything else fades. In the way it returns again and again, confirming what is true. You begin to trust it, not blindly, but through experience. Through recognizing how it has guided you before, how it has remained consistent, how it has never led you into confusion or regret when you followed it with a sincere heart. And slowly that inner struggle begins to quiet, because you are no longer trying to force clarity through effort alone. You are learning to recognize what has already been given to you, a peace that does not need to prove itself, only to be acknowledged. The Holy Spirit does not leave you guessing in chaos. He anchors you in peace, and when you learn to follow that peace, you will find yourself walking with a confidence that does not depend on knowing everything, but on trusting the one who does. And as you begin to recognize that peace, as you learn to discern the gentle difference between your own thoughts and the voice of the Holy Spirit, something deeper begins to unfold within you. A relationship, because this is not simply about hearing guidance or receiving direction or making the right decisions. This is about knowing him. The Holy Spirit is not a distant voice that appears only in moments of need. He is a constant presence, and like any relationship, there is a closeness that grows through time, through attention, through intentional connection. You do not become sensitive to his voice overnight. It is something that develops, something that deepens as you continue to turn your heart toward him again and again. There is a quiet invitation in this, an invitation not just to listen, but to draw near. And often it begins in the simplest ways, in moments of stillness where you choose to pause, not because you are searching for answers, but because you desire his presence. In times of reflection where you allow your thoughts to settle, creating space for something more than your own understanding to emerge. In quiet prayers that are not filled with many words, but with a sincere openness, a willingness to be aware. These moments may seem small, almost insignificant at first, but they are not. Because every time you choose to become still, every time you turn your attention inward with a heart that is open, you are strengthening your awareness of him. You are learning how to recognize what has always been near, and slowly something begins to shift. What once felt distant begins to feel familiar. What once felt uncertain begins to feel recognizable. The voice that you struggled to identify becomes clearer, not because it has changed, but because you have spent time learning its nature. This is how sensitivity grows. It is not through striving, not through pressure, not through trying to force an experience. It is through consistency, through returning again and again to that place of quiet connection, through valuing his presence, even when nothing dramatic seems to happen. Because growth in this area is often subtle. You may not notice it in a single moment. You may not feel a sudden transformation, but over time you begin to see the difference. You respond more quickly to those gentle impressions. You recognize his peace more easily. You become less distracted by the noise of your own thoughts and more attentive to what carries his presence. And what once required effort begins to feel natural. This is the beauty of relationship. It changes you from the inside. You begin to desire what aligns with him. You become more aware of what draws you closer and what pulls you away. Your thoughts, your responses, your decisions start to reflect that growing connection. Not because you are trying to imitate something, but because something within you is being shaped. And there is a tenderness in this process, because the Holy Spirit does not rush your growth. He does not demand perfection. He walks with you patiently, meeting you where you are, guiding you step by step. There will be moments when you feel uncertain, moments when you question whether you are truly hearing Him. But even in those moments, the relationship is still growing, because it is not built on flawless understanding. It is built on willingness, willingness to return, willingness to listen, willingness to remain open, even when you do not have all the answers. And the more you lean into that willingness, the more natural it becomes to recognize His voice. You begin to notice how quickly your heart responds when He speaks, how easily you sense when something aligns with His presence, how gently you are drawn back when you begin to drift. It is no longer something you are trying to figure out. It becomes something you live in, a daily awareness, a quiet connection that moves with you through every moment, not just the still ones. Because as your sensitivity grows, you begin to recognize Him not only in silence, but even in the middle of your day, in the flow of your thoughts, in the decisions you make without hesitation. And that is where the relationship becomes real. Not confined to a specific time or place, but woven into the very fabric of your life. A presence that is not distant, not occasional, but constant. And as this awareness deepens, you realize something that changes everything. You are not trying to reach Him, you are learning to walk with Him. And as this relationship begins to take root within you, as you grow in awareness, in discernment, in recognizing that quiet peace, there comes a moment, sometimes small, sometimes deeply significant, where you are faced with a choice, not a loud dramatic moment, but a simple inward knowing that calls for a response. Because hearing the Holy Spirit is only the beginning. What you do with what you hear is where everything begins to change. There is something powerful about obedience, even in its smallest form. A gentle nudge to pause when you would normally rush. A quiet prompting to speak when you would rather remain silent. A sense to step forward, even when uncertainty lingers. These moments may seem ordinary, almost too simple to matter, but they carry more weight than you realize. Because every time you respond, every time you choose to follow that quiet leading, something within you becomes stronger. Not louder, but clearer. It is as though a pathway is being formed within your spirit. A pathway of recognition, of trust, of alignment. And the more you walk that path, the more familiar it becomes. What once required hesitation begins to feel natural. What once felt uncertain begins to carry a quiet confidence. But obedience is not always easy. There will be times when the Holy Spirit leads you in a direction that does not make immediate sense. Times when it challenges your comfort, when it asks you to release control, when it calls you to trust beyond what you can see. And in those moments, another voice often rises, one that questions, that hesitates, that tries to pull you back into what feels safe. This is where the choice becomes real. Because you can ignore that gentle leading, you can reason your way out of it, delay it, dismiss it as unnecessary, and at first it may not seem like much has changed. Life continues, your thoughts move on, everything appears the same on the surface, but something subtle begins to happen within. The clarity you once felt starts to fade. The sensitivity you are beginning to develop becomes less sharp, not because the Holy Spirit has stopped speaking, but because you have become less responsive to His voice. It is not a punishment, it is a natural result of disconnection. When a voice is continually ignored, it becomes easier to overlook. Not because it is no longer present, but because your attention has shifted elsewhere. And this is why obedience matters so deeply. Not because you are trying to earn something, not because you are striving to be perfect, but because every response strengthens the connection you are learning to recognize. Every step of obedience affirms, I trust this voice, I am willing to follow. And in that willingness, clarity increases. You begin to notice how the Holy Spirit entrusts you with more, not necessarily more information, but a deeper awareness. The impressions become more distinct. The peace becomes more steady. The discernment becomes more immediate. It is as though your spirit becomes attuned, aligned, responsive in a way that was not possible before. And this is not limited to the large decisions in life. In fact, it is most often built in the smallest ones. The quiet choice to listen when you feel prompted. The decision to act when it would be easier to ignore. The willingness to follow through, even when no one else sees it. These moments, repeated over time, create a pattern, a rhythm of obedience that shapes your inner life. And within that rhythm, something beautiful begins to take place. You no longer feel as though you are searching for direction. You begin to move with it. There is a flow, a quiet alignment between your thoughts and His leading. Not perfect, not without moments of hesitation, but steady. And even when you falter, even when you miss it, the invitation remains. The Holy Spirit does not withdraw in frustration. He continues to draw near, continues to guide, continues to speak. And you are given another opportunity to respond, to listen again, to step forward. Because this journey is not about getting everything right. It is about learning to respond. And as you do, as you continue to choose obedience in those quiet, often unseen moments, something within you becomes deeply rooted. A confidence that is not based on your own understanding, but on your growing trust in the one who is leading you. You begin to realize that his voice is not something distant that you must chase. It is something present that you are learning to follow. And with every step of obedience, that path becomes clearer. Until one day you look back and see that what once felt uncertain has become a way of life. A life that moves, not by noise or pressure, but by the quiet, faithful leading of the Holy Spirit within you. And it all grows stronger every time you choose to follow the whisper,